On the afternoon of December 9, 1945, a heavy 1938 Cadillac Model 75 moved slowly. It moved through the ruins of a shattered empire, and inside sat a man who had just helped save the world, General George Patton. The car traveled at barely 20 miles per hour, a slow pace for a man known for lightning-fast armored thrusts. Europe. Suddenly, without signal or warning, a 2.5-ton military truck careened across the road, slamming into the general's car. It was a strange low-speed collision where the driver and the other passenger in the car were barely scratched by the impact. The dog in front was fine, but in the back seat the 4-star general who survived 2 world wars lay rumpled and paralyzed. His neck was broken and he would linger in agony for 12 days before finally passing away in a lonely hospital bed. In his final moments, the legacy he left behind was not just victory, but a chilling warning, a prophecy about a 3rd World War. His superiors refused to hear written. At the time, politicians called him a madman while the press labeled him a liability. But 5 years later, when the Iron Curtain descended and American soldiers were dying in Korea, the world realized with horror. They realized the old soldier dying in that hospital room might have been the only sane man left in 1945. What did Patton see that everyone else missed, and why did he want to turn his tanks against his own allies amidst victory? Today, we reopen the file on 1945 to hear the warning that history tried to bury regarding the death of a legend. To understand the tragedy of his death, we must rewind 7 months to May 7, 1945, near Frankfurt, Germany. Outside a commandeered German mansion, American soldiers were firing rifles into the air, drinking and cheering for the victory. But inside a quiet room, 2 men sat across from each other at an ornate table, though the mood was anything but celebratory. One was Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, the architect of victory, looking forward to peace, and the other was George Patton. Patton was not smiling. Instead, he stared at Eisenhower with an intensity that bordered on desperation and deep concern. He had not come to toast the victory or drink champagne. He had come to deliver a warning that could not wait. Patton said, his voice steady but urgent, "We are going to have to fight them eventually, so let us do it now while we can win." He was not talking about the defeated Germans. He was talking about the Soviet Union, the new threat rising in the East. For 3 years, the West had held together a fragile alliance with Joseph Stalin to defeat the common enemy Hitler. In American newspapers, Stalin was affectionately called Uncle Joe, and the Red Army were portrayed as heroic liberators. But Patton looked Eisenhower in the eye and calmly suggested that the United States should turn its guns on its Soviet allies. Eisenhower replied coldly, "George, you do not understand politics. The war is over and we are going home to our families." Patton fell silent, but a chill ran through him, realizing Eisenhower was blind to the geopolitical catastrophe forming. Patton knew his words would strain their friendship and likely end his career, but he could not stay silent about what he saw. His fear was not born from abstract theory, but from the reality on the ground as his troops pushed deep into Central Europe. As his tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia and up against the shifting lines of Soviet control, he did not see a disciplined army. He saw a force that disturbed him to his core with intelligence, reports describing the Red Army not as liberators but conquerors. They were systematically stripping the land, dismantling factories to ship east, while seizing livestock and machinery, leaving nothing behind. Far worse were the reports of brutality against civilians, summary executions, and the forced deportation of entire populations to labor camps. Patton was no stranger to the cruelty of war, but he saw something different here, something that went beyond standard warfare. He saw an empire expanding, its borders not a democracy being restored as promised by the politicians back home in Washington. In a letter to his wife Beatrice, he wrote with characteristic bluntness that he had no desire to understand the Russians. He only wanted to calculate how much lead and iron it would take to kill them, which was a cold military assessment. Patton had analyzed the Soviet logistical situation and knew that while the Red Army had massive manpower, they were exhausted. They had bled white to defeat Germany, and their supply lines stretched thousands of miles back to Moscow, being incredibly fragile. They depended on rail lines that could easily be cut, whereas the American forces in 1945 were at their peak. They had total air superiority, and their supply lines from the Atlantic were untouched, allowing for continuous reinforcement and unlimited supplies. Patton looked at his thousands of Sherman-Tanks battle-hardened divisions and told Under-Secretary of War Robert Patterson, "We could beat the Russians in 6 weeks," he stated with absolute confidence, believing the timing was perfect for victory. It was a staggering claim, but Patton believed that a window of opportunity was closing fast and they had to act. If they did not act now, while the Soviets were weak, the West would eventually face a nuclear-armed Soviet empire. To achieve this, Patton proposed a plan that horrified everyone who heard it, suggesting the United States should not disarm Germans. Instead, he argued we should keep them ready. "I would rather have a German division in front of me than a French one behind me," he noted privately. He believed the German soldiers, terrified of the Russians, would fight with desperation alongside the Americans to push the Red Army back. Politically, this was suicide. The U.S. had just spent years demonizing the Germans, suggesting they be rearmed was seen as moral treason. Yet Patton was not alone. Across the Channel, Winston Churchill had commissioned a secret plan with the code name Operation Unthinkable. This mirrored Patton's logic: a surprise attack by British and American forces, aided by rearmed Germans, to liberate Poland and Dr. Stalin back. But like Churchill, Patton found himself shouting into a void. Washington wanted demobilization, and the public wanted their sons home. Congress demanded peace dividends, as the summer of 1945 war on Patton's frustration turned into a dangerous public spectacle. He watched as the Soviets rigged elections in Poland and installed puppet governments in Hungary and Romania, suffocating freedom. He saw the very freedom his men had died for being suffocated by a new totalitarianism, while the world looked away in silence. "We are going to have to fight them," he kept saying. "Why not do it now?" The press began to turn on him, painting him as a warmonger. The press painted him as a relic who could not adjust to peace. The final straw came in August 1945 with a reporter's question. When asked by reporters about the denazification of Germany, Patton argued that you could not simply fire every German who had held a party card. He argued they were needed to run the water, power, and trains. In a disastrous attempt to explain this, he compared the Nazi Party to U.S. parties. He tried to make a point about political affiliation versus technical competence, but the press crucified him and the damage was done. Eisenhower, under immense political pressure, relieved Patton of his command of the Third Army in October 1945, a humiliating end. He was shunted off to a paper pushing job rewriting history books, which was a humiliating end for a celebrated war hero. But in those final months, his letters home became darker, as he felt he was being persecuted not just for his gaffes. He believed he was the only one telling the truth and warned that the United States was disarming too fast, leaving itself vulnerable. "I will resign, not retire," he wrote, planning to return to America to speak directly to the people about the truth. He intended to reveal everything he knew about the Soviet betrayal and the incompetence of the political leaders letting it happen. This brings us back to that cold December day. The timing of the accident on December 9th was incredibly suspicious to those who knew. He was scheduled to leave Europe the very next day. The accident itself was bizarre and defied logical explanation. The truck driver, Robert Thompson, had taken the truck without authorization and had 2 mysterious passengers with him in the cab. He turned directly into Patton's car on a straight road with no traffic, making the collision seem almost deliberate. And most strangely, after the crash, Thompson was whisked away, never court-martialed, and vanished into obscurity. Even in the hospital, lying paralyzed with a broken neck, Patton's mind was sharp as he spoke to his doctors. He told his doctors this is a hell of a way to die. He was not just complaining about the physical pain. He seemed to sense the absurdity and perhaps the malice behind his fate, realizing his warning would be silenced. On December 21, 1945, a pulmonary embolism stopped his heart and the man who wanted to save the world died. Less than 3 months after Patton was buried in the Luxembourg American cemetery, Winston Churchill stood at a podium. The clearing from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic and Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. The world gasped, but it was exactly what Patton had predicted in that room in Frankfurt a year earlier. The prophecy unfolded with terrifying accuracy, witnessing the Berlin blockade in 1940 and the Soviet atomic bomb. The invasion of South Korea in 1950 meant the Cold War, at unwanted to end, would drag on. Historians still debate the morality and feasibility of Patton's ideas and whether the plan was madness or genius. Could the exhausted Allies really have pushed the Red Army back, or was the Soviet military machine too powerful? Would it have led to a disaster, or would it have saved Eastern Europe from decades of oppression and suffering? We will never know, but what we do know is that George Patton was not merely a blunt instrument of war. He was a student of history who understood that weakness invites aggression, a lesson often forgotten in times of peace. He saw the storm gathering when everyone else was looking at the rainbow, hoping for a permanent peace. In the end, Patton was a tragic figure, a man out of time who belonged to an era of warrior kings. He possessed the vision to see the future, but lacked the political grace to convince the world to change it. He died not on a glorious battlefield, but in the wreckage of a slow-moving car in the silence of a hospital. But his warning remains etched in history, a reminder that the cost of peace is oft an eternal vigilance. If you want more uncovered files from history's most dangerous moments, make sure to like and subscribe.